Hello?
Hello?
Who's that?
Who's that?
Where, what is this?
John?
Where?
Where?
Joe?
Welcome, children. You are in my chamber of podcast filth.
It's so dark.
Yeah, what are we doing here?
You two will be conducting a little experiment for me. My gremlins tell me we need to produce more content. You will be pulled here from your torture once every week or two to talk about what little you know of magic.
But what do we actually know about magic?
I don't know, just talk about when you started playing or something.
Yeah, we can do that. So like our magic origins.
Well, what other stuff can we talk about?
We can broach other topics in the future, like Budget Commander, debaucherous game variants, deeper looks into decks you've played on the show, various magic news, arena, maybe your favorite magic cards, I don't know, other things people don't care about. Just start talking for Kozalek's sake.
Sweet, I'll go first.
Pod. 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 Pod.
Hello and welcome to the official Quest for the Janklord podcast, officially known as Podquest for the Janklord. I'm one of your hosts, Joe, denizen of the dungeon, and with me, I have our other host.
I am John, officially another denizen of the dungeon.
It's official. We're going to lay out why we want to do this podcast, what we hope to achieve with it. I'm going to hand it over to John because he's going to explain some of the reasons we are partaking in this endeavor.
So we have some guests lined up that are going to be super fun to talk with. We have a whole variety of topics already that we want to talk about. Mostly it's going to be in the realms of like Budget Commander. We might stray away from that a little bit, get some Vorthos stuff in there, or maybe tell some stories about our origins in the magic world and other things like that. And yeah, we're just looking to have fun with it. We'll see how it evolves as it goes, but for now, we're going to be talking about Budget Commander.
Yes. Today we're going to be talking about how to find cards on a budget, as well as building budget decks. We're just going to kind of go over all of the different ways that we have constructed decks, how we find the cards, how we build the decks, our thought process and evaluation in that area. So to start off, the number one suggestion that we have, and we do this quite frequently, is just going to the game store in your area, if you do have one available, and rummaging through the bargain bin.
Oh yeah, I've spent many hours rummaging through that bargain bin.
Yes, same.
Many hours.
And the time flies by, not necessarily because it's that fun, but because you are looking for cards that actually work. One of the things I want to talk about in this area specifically is how you approach going through the bargain bin, because it's a daunting task. If you've seen our episodes where we go to the game store, the LGS special, we exaggerate a little bit, but for the most part, it's true. We literally carry all of those huge bins back to the tables to sort through them, because cards that feed into the decks are so far and few between that it takes that much to actually find cards that are worthy of being put into the deck.
And then, even then, they don't always work out,
Exactly. So, one of the things I want to talk about specifically is the fact that when you go to look through the bargain bin or go to look through a huge collection of cards, go in with a purpose. Understand what you're looking for. If you have a green-black commander, obviously don't go in and start pulling out red and white cards. Focus in on the green and black cards and just pull out as many as you possibly can to begin with. And you're going to go through and refine those cards after you've pulled them out.
Yeah. you just kind of get a lay of the land.
Yep, you get a feel for, okay, after you've pulled the cards out, here's if my commander is about playing lands or drawing cards, here are my ramp spells, or here are my card draw spells. Artifacts can be used broadly across everything. But when you go, don't just sift through the bargain bin lightly looking for things, maybe I'll like this. Worry about focusing on a specific set of cards after you've pulled out everything.
It's really easy once you get in that zone. Like if you have one color, you just like you flip through and you just like hone in on like the reds or whatever color you're looking for.
Yes.
And it's just reds and artifacts, and that's all you pull out.
Yes. So the other thing you can do if you don't have an LGS is if you have friends that you regularly play Magic with, there's a good chance that some of them have probably played for a long time and have a huge collection built up. Ask them to go through their old cards that they're not using anymore. See if they're okay with lending you or either just giving you their commons or uncommons that they don't usually use. I know for myself, I have a ton of cards that I've just given to some of the members of our group because I don't have a use for them anymore.
One thing that we've talked about in the past is how different our timelines are in how we got into Magic. Mm-hmm. Like, you and I started way before Dan and Tim and Sean. So our collections are pretty extensive. I started in Zendikar and you started in Alara.
Yes.
And I bought a bunch of boxes, over the years. I've just collected a ton of cards and I don't use so many of them. So I just, periodically I'll go through all my cards and I'll just pick out the stuff that I'm never really going to use it. Or if I have a bunch of copies, like if I have 6 copies of something, I'll whittle it down to 4 copies. Or even just 1 if I'm planning to use it for Commander. I actually, you whittled through your stuff too. And I was just going to give my stuff to Goodwill. I had a whole box of it. And Danny caught word and he's like, could I take a peek through the box? And I was like, of course, yeah. So I gave him the box and he found a ton of stuff that he could use and was going to use and literally has used in his deck building. And
I did the exact same thing with Tim. He was looking to buff his collection and build more commander decks, have a little bit more variety than what he was used to looking at, because he had just recently started playing with us. And he saw the collection that you and I had built up, and obviously for every good card that goes into a commander deck, there are 30 that don't have any functional use. Typically, but they might be useful for somebody else. So
absolutely. And even like using the more budget versions of cards, like using a negate in place of an actual, counterspell. Because I have 100,000 negates in a box and maybe only a dozen counterspells, and just being able to utilize that as a newer player.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bad example, but, just using a little bit suboptimal card, like a budget version of a card.
Right.
And, which is really why we started Quest for the Janklord, is it started because our collections were so much bigger than Dan and Tim's and Sean's. Mm-hmm. And we decided we wanted to make the playing field a little more even, so we put the budget restriction, and we've been building budget Magic ever since with our 79 cent restriction, and it really makes for some fun and engaging games, and it helps you use that old stuff that you probably never would look at otherwise. And then it might be kind of hard to ask, like, hey, do you have old cards? But most people are probably going to be pretty cool about
especially if they're part of your play group. And I want to do a quick shout out to Mitch over at Commander's Quarters, because he is a master of finding those cards that are just kind of not a counter spell. Right. Yeah. Little suboptimal, but are completely budget. So he will gripe and moan about the fact that Wayfarer's Bauble, he ruined the price of that, and it can't be used in budget decks anymore.
It is exactly what happens.
Mitch, if you haven't checked out his channel, definitely go look at Commander's Quarters, because he makes excellent budget content. He does a lot of deck techs and deck reviews for budget decks that go in detail about why he put cards in the deck, what cards he put in the deck. He's got a very thorough thought process, and he makes very, very good budget Magic decks. A lot that are better than what I actually play with. Which
yes,
is,
yes, actually, though. It's crazy.
Yes,
He's so good at deck building. A lot of those cards can be found in a bargain bin.
Yep.
Like, actually.
And he, another thing that is useful to do is look on Scryfall for cards that have a similar text, right? So if you are looking to draw cards, obviously you're not going to be able to put Rhystic Studies.
Or Mystic Remora.
Yes. Yeah. But there are alternatives that you absolutely can use.
Going on that frame of mind, I mean, what is it? It's card draw, and it's recursive card draw. There's a ton of budget recursive card draw out there.
It might not be as efficient, but in a budget deck, efficiency isn't really like, you are looking for synergies in a budget deck. You're looking for cards that go together and work well. And oftentimes when you're going through that bargain bin, you're going to find cards you never in a million years would have considered putting in a deck. It wouldn't show up on your radar. You wouldn't know about it. But it could be like a key piece to what you're building that actually really functions well.
Exactly. I think, so I absolutely love EDH Rec. I use it all the time when I'm building like a non-budget deck. It's my go-to, but a lot of the things that we are building around in budget stuff isn't going to show up on EDH Rec. So it just goes under everybody's radar. So you're going to be able to find that stuff very easily and very cheaply.
Now let's talk about some of the other ways you can come across old collections. And one way that is super prevalent, and I know that there are series on YouTube of people doing this, and that's buying cheap collections on eBay and Craigslist.
Yeah, it's it can be a little bit iffy. You kind of have to suss out the right auction to go for. It's usually the ones that don't have a lot of Magic sales. So if you find some random seller that's selling like a collection of old Magic cards, those are going to be the ones you want to go for, because the ones that that are sold by large sellers, it's in the same vein as like a repack.
Right.
You're just literally getting like the trash of trash. And they might offer you, oh, you get so many rares and so many mythics, but it's going to be
bad.
Those. It's just all bad stuff. So
Ugin's Nexus mythics.
Yeah. Ugin's Nexus. Is that a mythic? Is that a land?
It's a mythic artifact that you prevent people from taking extra turns, but the wording is really weird. It's awful.
Gotcha.
It's awful.
Oh, man.
Costs like 7 or something ridiculous. It's awful.
Wild. It's horrible.
So if you get these collections, you're going to have to haggle with price, most likely. If it's somebody who's selling...
If it's Craigslist, yeah.
Right. If it's somebody who's selling their collection that they haven't touched in many years, they might have a conflated idea of what their cards are worth. So it's between you and the seller, how much you're going to pay for it, if you think it's worth it. And use your best judgment. Don't just...
yes. On that point, I actually kind of got screwed. I met a guy, I was working at a restaurant, and this guy came in and we started talking about Magic, and he's like, oh yeah, I've been just trying to get rid of my old collection. And I was like, oh really? I mean, well, like, how big of a collection is it? Blah, blah, blah. It was like 1,000 cards. It wasn't a huge collection, but it was big enough. And he's like, yeah, it's probably mostly from like the Kamigawa block. And my ears perked up. I was like, ooh, Kamigawa. Ooh, I bet there's some good stuff in there. He's like, yeah, I don't know how much I really want to sell it for. I was like 1,000 cards that are probably bargain bin. Who knows? I think I ended up paying like $70 for it or something, which in the end actually turned out to be horrible. There was nothing in there. There was literally nothing in there. It was all of the pre-constructed Kamigawa decks, whatever they call those. Yeah. I forget what they used to call the pre-constructed decks, but and they didn't even have most of the rares in them. It was a horrible collection, and I probably shouldn't have paid more than $20 for it, but
so
what can you do? So be careful.
Use your judgment. Look through the cards before you buy them.
If you can.
If you can, yes. And that's something you're just going to have to negotiate with whoever you're dealing with. So on that same note, if you do get a good collection, there are a couple of ways you can utilize that collection in more than just pulling out the good cards for yourself. And one of the creative ways you could do this is if you buy a large collection, have your play group build decks out of that collection.
Absolutely. It's like a cube almost.
Yeah, almost.
Like
just a random...
Like a horrifically jank cube.
yes.
Yeah.
It's like strictly black cards and maybe a few green and white cards in there.
Yep.
It'll be fun. It'll be goofy and fun, and that's ultimately, what you try to do in Commander. It's all as much fun for me personally. Winning is, I just like having a fun experience. I like for everyone to feel like they were part of the game. They had equal stake in it. They don't end up feeling bad because they spent the whole game doing nothing, or they always got shut out every time they tried to do something.
Yeah, it's never fun bringing a power level 3 deck to a 7 or 8 table.
Right.
Yeah.
Not on the same level to compete with.
Exactly. Another thing that you could probably do if your friends don't want to actually create the decks themselves out of the janky stuff, you could create 4 or 5 or 10 janky decks out of the collection that you found, and then you can just present them to your friends to play with, and that way you're all going to be on the same level, and everyone could possibly have a fun, weird, janky play experience.
Yep. Another way to create budget decks is, or if you want to do it as a group, is to set a limit. So you could set a per card limit like we have of 79 cents, or you could just say general budget is $20, including Commander, so you can't go over $20. And that leaves your friend group with the choice of whether or not to put all their eggs in one basket and buy 5 powerful cards, and then have to fill out the rest with a lot of really janky cards, or if you spread it out across, let's say you take that and you say, okay, the max I'm going to spend on any given card is $2. So you have a couple of $2 cards, a couple of $1 cards, and everything else falls under that. 20 is a really tight budget. You can do it. You'll probably end up with a few suboptimal cards.
Just a few.
Yeah.
Just a few.
But it's up to you. The jankier, the better.
Yeah, and like we're trying to say, it's all about having that mutual experience. Like, it's all about having like the same-ish power level. You can swing around with Emrakuls and whatever else, big swingy expensive cards.
Yeah. Or
you could play with big swingy not expensive cards.
Yeah. A big 12-12 with trample is still a 12-12 with trample. That's a lot of power.
Exactly.
So one of the things that we also want to talk about is that budget is not restrictive towards power level. It really comes down to how well you can synergize your cards.
Yes.
And like we talked about earlier, Mitch from the Commander's Quarters is phenomenal at...
He's a master.
He really is. Except for Wayfarer's Bauble, he is a phenomenal deck builder.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Wayfarer's Bauble is a great card.
It is.
It's a great card.
But
it's just
like
not budget anymore.
Details in many of his videos, there are just wild interactions with some old artifacts, really with just old cards. The wordier, the better. Most of the time.
Wow.
Well, right.
What is that one? Mercenine? Mercenine? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's like 16 lines of text.
Yes.
It's all bad.
All to say that you can pay a blue to tap Mercenine so it doesn't attack.
Yes.
There are some very strange cards that just kind of fly under the radar because there are more powerful, more expensive cards that people would tend to go for. But that doesn't limit the synergy you can find by looking for these old artifacts.
Mitch is a master, obviously, but he has his decks built, and that's the deck that he has. If you're building your own deck, you might want to think of your own synergies and stuff, and a really great way to get help with that or have a resource with that is joining like a Facebook group or a subreddit. like, I'm a part of a couple EDH Facebook groups, and people are always posting, oh, what are your, sneaky staples for this commander? And usually they aren't going to show up on EDH Rec because they are that sneaky stuff. And you just, the secret tech. What's your secret tech? And just finding out the budget things that other people have put into their decks is a really great way to interact with the community, for one. Mm-hmm. And then also just to get those ideas that maybe you don't want to go through a bargain bin. Because a really great way to get budget Magic is on, like, TCG Player.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch uses heavily played and damaged cards in his pricing. And, like he says, those cards need a home too. They still are tournament legal, and they're still fun to play with, even if they're a little bit rough around the edges.
Yeah. I will vouch for the fact that I am sometimes particular about how my cards look, but if I can find a functional card that's heavily damaged, I will play it. Like, if the text is visible and it works, I'm not going to pass up on that opportunity to go, oh, holy cow, I can pick up this rare that's actually really good, but it's $7 cheaper because I'm playing the heavily damaged copy. And You can get a range of damage, like some dog ears or some frayed corners or a crack in the card. It just depends.
Some damage is, like, worse than other damage. So, like, if you get a card that is literally, like, bent in the middle, that's probably not going to fly for, like, tournament play. If you're doing tournament play, or if you're doing LGS play or whatever, people might frown on something just because even in a sleeve you can tell that it's bent. Other than that, though, it should be pretty fair game.
Yeah, absolutely.
My copy of Ristic Study actually was a damaged copy, and it was back when it was in, like, the $12 range, and I got it for $4 on TCG Player.
Yeah. Because
it was damaged, and it looks really rough, and I actually Sharpied the corners. Like, I Sharpied around the edge because it was so worn around all the edges, like it was completely white. So I Sharpied it, and it's fine. You know what I mean? It's plays.
Fine. It looks good. Looks fine.
Yeah.
You can tell that it's a Ristic Study.
You can tell it's a Ristic Study.
Exactly.
And it feels like a Magic card in the sleeve. So
yeah. Yep.
So there's a ton of ways you can go about creating budget Magic decks. You can find your own creative ways. I mean, we just highlighted a couple. TCG Player, eBay, finding some from a friend, from a bargain bin. There's a lot of sources that you have to create budget Magic decks. And really what it boils down to is it's all about having, like, a fun game of Commander with your friends.
Yeah.
Having an even playing field and just having wild, fun interactions.
Sometimes it can be tough when your group is used to playing the same decks over and over again, and one person is always winning because their deck is a cut above the rest. One of the ways that we found to solve that was what you see on Quest for the Janklord, is budget gameplay. It resets the playing field. Everyone has to go out and find cards, whether it is through eBay, whether it is through the bargain bin. However you go about finding those cards, the point is to have fun. It's to have that engaging experience where no one has a leg up on somebody else because of money.
Absolutely. And this is not to say that competitive EDH can't be fun. Like, right. I have a CDH deck and I absolutely love it, and I love playing against other CDH decks. But if your games have become like an arms race and it's just who can, fork
spend
over
the most money,
a little more money, yeah, exactly. That's not fun. That doesn't lead to good times or fun interactions. It's so just have fun. Reset your play group and build jank and watch our videos about being janky.
The jankier, the better.
The jankier, the better. We have so much fun playing with jank decks, and it really did an awesome thing for our play group to start playing with janky stuff.
Yes.
We weren't always Commander players, though. We had a long history before we even got into Commander, or before we even started playing together. Joe, you said you started playing in Alara, right?
Yes, so I started playing in Alara block when the pre-con decks that came out had the shiny foil on the front. So I got a couple of those decks. I got the Jund Alara deck that had the worm on the front, and then I also got the Grixis Alara deck that had the vampire on the front. And I got those because the guys at my high school were into playing Magic, and I kind of wanted to jump into that as well. The swimming team that I was on played Magic, and after our practices or after meets, they would play Magic, and I was like, I want to be a part of that. I want to get involved in that. So they kind of brought me into it, and I mainly played kitchen table Magic for many, many years after that. Alara up through Zendikar. I did go and play a single draft during Zendikar block, and that kind of solidified my love for the game because the guys that I played with were absolutely wonderful. They could tell I was new. I didn't know how to play limited Magic at all. They kind of coached me through it. I won a single game. I had my hand held the entire time, but I won a game, and I was like, if this is how if this is representative of the community as a whole, then I want to stay engaged in this game. So that kept me going. That was kind of when the Duels of the Planeswalkers was coming out for both PC and Xbox and such. And I was like, well, I want to play Magic, but after high school, I didn't really have people to play with. So I played the Duels of the Planeswalkers, which was the computer game equivalent of Magic.
Yes, I have put many, many hours myself into Magic Duels. That was on my iPad. I just loved Magic Duels.
So I played a little bit of Standard during Theros block. I built a Colonian Hydra deck that was my whole payoff. It was just Colonian Hydra, putting the counters on it and then swinging for tons of damage. I didn't do very well. It was a very bad deck. But I still had fun playing it.
It sounds as Joe as it gets.
Yes, just stomping. After that, I kind of just went back to playing Duels of the Planeswalkers. And I'll pass it over to John, because that's where our stories kind of intersect.
Yeah, that is kind of how we met, isn't it? My first Magic experience was buying a box off of eBay. I didn't know anything about the game. I was looking up like money schemes because I was a poor college kid, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get some cool cards out of the deal.
This box will pay my way through this semester.
Oh my goodness, that was so far from the truth. I didn't know how much they went for. I think I paid $120 on eBay for the Zendikar box. And I can't tell you what I made off of it, but it was probably less than $60. So
well worth the money for somebody who has no idea.
Exactly. I think almost all of that came from the fetch lands that I so wish now that I never got rid of.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was opening packs, and one of my friends saw me opening them, and he's like, hey, I didn't know you played Magic. Oh, that's awesome. We should play sometime. And I was like, I don't know how to play Magic. And he's like, I'll teach you. In college, I had plenty of time because I was a total slacker, and I totally delved headfirst into Magic. That was my senior year of college. I casually played with friends over the years. You know, we would buy a box and we'd draft it, or we would play sealed with a box or whatever, and all pitch in and whatever. We made some standard decks or some like sort of standard decks. I made a Birthing Pod deck that to this day is still one of my favorite decks. Like
Birthing Pod is
time.
Your pet card.
Yes, and not like a Birthing Pod combo type of deck, but just a toolbox
value.
Toolbox deck.
Yeah.
Value and toolbox, and I just love that style of Magic. Like, I have an answer for that.
Yes.
That was like how I loved playing.
We used to play Modern with our janky Modern decks, and I remember your Birthing Pod deck. You had a ton of fun with that. You'd be like, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? And then you'd dig for the dumbest cards, and it would beat me, and I'd be like, I hate this. This sucks. I hate this.
All the time, yeah. Oh, that was fun. That was such a good deck. I loved it.
Yes.
But I didn't really go to LGSs. So I did a lot of the tabletop. My first experience in LGS was the Avacyn Restored pre-release. And it was a midnight pre-release. And it was 6 rounds.
Oh,
And
ouch.
at the end of it, I think it was almost 8 a.m. by the end of it.
Probably.
So midnight to 8 a.m. And I wanted to kill myself. It was one of the worst experiences. Thank goodness it was like a Friday to a Saturday, so I could just sleep all day. But it was absolutely awful. But I did meet a bunch of friends that I would never have met otherwise.
Right.
And I exchanged a bunch of phone numbers and found a bunch of new people to play with. And I made some friends there that I still talk to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty awesome. After that, I was super hooked. So I went to all the pre-releases that I could, and I attended. I was a little intimidated to draft. I did that a couple times at LGSs. I was a little scared of the F&M stuff, but I did start going to a few standard F&Ms, and during that time is when our paths sort of cross. Mm-hmm. So I was playing Magic pretty regularly, pretty heavily. And you, we didn't really know each other very well.
We had kind of interacted in the past, but not to a major degree. We knew who each other were.
Exactly.
But
from college. We both went to the same college.
Yes. Yep. My junior year, I think it was, my roommates and I hosted a party, and we invited as many people as we possibly could. As the party wound down and people started to leave, I was kind of like, okay, I'm done socializing. So I pulled out my laptop and pulled up Duels of the Planeswalkers to start playing, while there were still a few people there. And one of the few people there was John.
Because I don't know how to leave a party.
Right.
For one thing.
But I had my back turned. I was kind of facing towards the wall, kicked my feet up, and I had my laptop out. So people who were walking past could look over my shoulder and see that I had Duels of the Planeswalkers open.
And I was walking past. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that Duel of the Planeswalkers? Do you play Magic? And you were like, yeah, I play Magic. I don't do a lot of paper, I think you said, or I don't know how my decks are these days. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. I'm not a very good player either. And I was like, we should just hang out sometime and play Magic.
Yeah.
And I ended up, I think I invited you to go to an F&M. I think it was just a standard, maybe, or a draft or something.
Yeah.
I think it was standard. And we did that heavily for a while. I mean, we became pretty good friends at that point.
We did. We pretty religiously went to Friday nights and played standard back during the cons block. We played a ton of standard. We would pretty much go every Friday night and play
We'd show up with our
homebrews.
Yeah. Oh, net deckers are the worst. Who wants to net deck? That was our mentality.
Right, and Commander was kind of out at this point, but we didn't give it any credence. We didn't pay attention to it. We were like, Standard's what we want to do.
The guy that taught me how to play Magic actually was like, you need to build an EDH deck, because he had this dragon, I think it was a green-red dragon EDH deck. He's like, oh, it's the best way to play Magic. And that was when I started playing Magic. And I was like, I don't know, I don't have really enough cards to do that, and blah, blah, blah. So I just kind of never gave it a second thought. And then I saw some of the CEDH players playing things like it was a 100-card Singleton Legacy. And that really turned me off, because it just felt expensive.
Yeah.
And I was just out of college. I just didn't have the money to put into it, I didn't think. So I always poo-pooed it. And we kind of poo-pooed it together. And
we did.
One day, though, was it you that brought it up?
It was, because I have a friend from childhood that we occasionally play Magic together still. And we had gotten together at a local game store. And he was like, hey, we should play Commander together. I'd only brought standard decks with me. And I was like, well, I don't have a deck. And it was just when the monocolor Commander decks had been released, or recently been released. So I went and got a Freya deck, the green Freya deck.
Freya-Lise.
Yeah. And played that, and I actually won. And I was like, oh, that was kind of fun. Elf ball. Who knew, right?
Yeah. Joe. Who knew?
Right,
Joe
green.
deck.
Yeah, a Joe deck. After I played that match, I brought it up to John. I was like, hey, you should buy a precon and we should just play. It's actually kind of fun. And that kind of started the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I was against the precons for some reason. I don't remember why, because I just have these weird biases against things. So, I was like, oh, yeah, you were like, we should build magic decks. Or commander decks, excuse me.
Yeah.
EDH decks. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I built a Bruna, and you built you built, what was your first one?
The green-white populate.
Yes, Trostani. Old Trostani. Yep. Yeah, so we built those. I hated my Bruna deck, but I kind of felt like I could see how EDH could be fun.
Yes.
Like I was, ooh, this is kind of cool. So
my deck was just big, dumb green and white things. Like, literally, I just took all of my rares and mythics and shoved them in the deck.
Shoved them, yes. Like, what are my good cards?
Yes!
That is very much, Bruna, less so, because she was obviously focused around enchantments.
Right.
But then I built my Narset deck, which to this day is still one of my favorite commander decks.
Yes.
I
refused to build anything other than... I kept my Trostani deck for the longest time.
So long.
It was
so long.
A pile of cards, and that's not an exaggeration. There was a little bit of synergy with tokens and stuff, but it would be like one creature that made one token. And I would try to populate off of this 7 CMC creature that made one token.
Yes.
And then I would try to populate. I would get run over by Narset. Narset would go crazy. And
at that time, I didn't even build her extra turns at that time. I mean, she's kind of turned into extra turns, which maybe I actually kind of want to steer away from, if I'm being honest. But she just, the value of Narset was just crazy. It was so hard to overcome. Yeah. So you built I bought you the precon.
Yes, you bought me the Shatter Gang.
Or Christmas or something. Yep.
Something, yeah. And
it was the Prosh precon.
Yeah, it was the Prosh precon. But I quickly switched to Shatter Gang because I realized that it could disrupt everything you were doing. You really only had Narset as the only creature in your deck. And Shatter Gang didn't care if things went to the graveyard. So as soon as that came out, I sacked a creature, got her off the board. She has hexproof. So I couldn't target her.
I'm just sacrificing her.
And eventually I would
super salty a couple times.
Yes.
I got so salty.
So I won like 4 or 5 games in a row with Shatter Gang versus Narset. And you got really, really upset after that. That was kind of moving into the Zendikar block. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try my hand at deck building once more. And I built my Omnath Locus of Rage. Yep.
Yes.
Which Battle for Zendikar had just come out. And so I built the red-green kind of big stuff deck. It was focused on playing lands and getting a lot of those land tokens, 5/5 tokens out. And just kind of had some really big haymakers because I was ramping a ton, didn't really have a focus, but it kind of evened our games out a little bit between my Omnath and your Narset.
Yeah, they became really even matches. Like we had a really good time with those decks. And I built more decks and you built more decks. I think I'm at this current point, I'm over 20 decks for sure.
I have 15 or 16.
At the time I already probably was going on like 6 or 7. And that was like a few months into playing, you know? Mm-hmm. Like it was just infectious.
Yes, so as soon as we started playing regularly, we got hooked. And sometimes we would choose to play Commander over going to Friday nights because we just absolutely loved it so much.
Yeah. Just one-on-one. One-on-one Commander.
Yep. We didn't have a play group to play with. We didn't really know anyone else who was playing at the time. Commander specifically. So it was just us. We would go to Monday night drafts, and then afterwards we would go to Old Chicago, and until like 11 or 12 at night, we would play Commander. Just the two of us.
Yes.
Sitting eating pizzas.
nachos.
Yes.
Yeah. So we would do those Monday drafts, and then we would do Fridays. We would usually play Commander.
Yeah.
But only just the two of us. But at Monday nights, so we've known Danny for a long time since college. I was roommates with Danny in college.
I did a lot of shows with him, like stage shows, plays, and musicals. Yeah. Yep.
And I had played with Dan a few times outside of college, actually. I just brought over my cards and we played, or we'd play Risk or whatever when we hung out. But we did sometimes play Magic. And he ended up wanting to hang out with us and play Magic. So he came to some Monday nights. So he started playing Draft a lot, and he was wildly good at Draft. Right away, he was...
Right away.
I know, he was so good at Draft.
Upsetting.
And then we kind of were like, hey, we have this thing that we do. It's called Commander. You should come join us. You want to try it out?
Yeah. You want to try it?
So we started playing that, and Tim was kind of the same way. He moved to the Twin Cities. And he and Dan have been buddies for life, since they were kids. And, we started bringing we started bringing Tim to Monday nights and drafting and stuff. And then also got him into Commander. We formed Janklord pretty closely after that. Like we said, we did it because we had an arms race going on, and I had a big collection and you had a big collection, and Tim and Dan and...
Yep. So relating to budget Magic, it was the case that our play group was John and I were winning
any given night. I think it was probably in the 90% that one of us was winning. Yeah,
right. And if it wasn't me winning, it was John.
Yeah.
Occasionally one of the guys would sneak a win in here and there, but we had built these decks a long time ago, put a lot of our old cards, a lot of powerful expensive cards into these decks, and it just wasn't something that the guys who had just joined us could keep up with.
And they did build some powerful decks.
Yes.
And then also, Sean joined us, and all he had was the Ur-Dragon Precon. And he pilots that thing like a master, but it's, at the end of the day, it's just a Precon.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't have the legs.
Right.
Sean is our Wheelmaster, by the way. So, but then we formed Quest for the Janklord, and here we are.
Here we are, playing budget janky cards and enslaved in a dungeon. I love it. Commander 24/7. It's literally all we have to do for entertainment.
It's wonderful,
and that's fine by me. We had a lot of fun just now talking about the different processes of building and finding budget janky cards. We hope to continue doing this. We have a couple of episodes lined up, as well as guests to come and visit us. We're going to discuss multiple topics, like we kind of teased at the beginning, between specific deck building or a special process that we might use. Vorthos, some story behind the cards, story behind the game. We have a special guest who is very much a Vorthos
master of the Vorthos
that we plan to have on.
So, well, yes, that might be episode 3 or 4.
But we have plenty of stuff to talk about in the meantime. If you like what you heard, leave a like. We also have t-shirts that the Demon has set up on an Etsy shop. Look for that link down below in the description.
We have a TCG Player affiliate link. So if you are going to use TCG Player to pick up some of those budget cards, click on that. It helps us out. It helps keep this train rolling, the Quest for the Janklord train.
And then we have a Patreon account. We would absolutely love your support. That is the main way we are keeping things rolling right now.
Yep.
It all goes back into the channel. So all of the improvements that you see across our first to our latest episode happen because of our patron support. So
absolutely,
we are very thankful for everyone who has contributed up to this point. So thanks for listening. We will see you in the next episode.
And stay janky.
And
be jank.
And be
jank. Stay jank.
Janklord. Have the jank. Goodbye.
Jank.
Goodbye.
Pod. 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 Pod.
Well, that was fine. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Now, back to the torture chamber for you boys.
Pod.
Just wanna take the